sometimes this happens. I long for a pen, long for a pen, long for a pen, and it's a little expensive, so I put it off, and then finally either opportunity comes along or I lose all impulse control and I buy it. And I get it, and instead of being thrilled, I find that I just don't think I'm not that keen on it anymore. This happened to me with the Omas Paragon and the Arco Brown Grail pen. Wanted that pen, wanted that pen, wanted that pen. And at the time, if I spent $300 on a pen, it was crazy expensive for me. And so this was a pen that was going for considerably more than that. Eventually I found one at a price I could handle with a little stretch, and I got it. And I wrote with it, and I thought, well, this is nice. Then it went in a pen holder on the shelf, and it's been there ever since. Fortunately, with regards to that pen, it's now worth like 3 times what I paid for it. So sometime I will sell it and no doubt just put that money in some other pens. So kind of similar to that, but not completely. And I feel a little guilty talking about a pen that I do think is pretty neat in a lot of ways, and a pen maker that I'd like to support, but it's just not thrilling me. So maybe it will sometime, but right now it's this. I have wanted an Oldwin pen for a very long time, ever since Jean on Pinterest started posting his beautiful collection of Oldwins. And then also my friend Sarge, who is a reseller of absolutely incredibly beautiful, both modern and vintage pens, saw his collection of them. And finally at the Chicago Pen Show, I just did it. I bought one. And there were several there that I liked, but this one in this celluloid that I've associated previously with the Visconti Speakeasy was just the ticket for me, because it's an unusual celluloid. You don't see that many pens in it. I think it's really fitting with the Oldwin design. This is quite a large pen, a bit bigger than a 149. Quite a large pen, near somewhat traditional cigar shape, although the ends are especially pointed for a cigar shaped pen. And the cap seems sort of has a wider girth than the body of the pen, than the barrel of the pen. And it also has this slight taper down up and back, taper down in the back. Beautiful shape pen, beautiful material for the pen. The striated celluloid looks great in this long pen that is not interrupted by a center band or anything like that. There's no markings on the barrel. I mean, it really is quite beautiful, I have to say. And of course, there's that smell of celluloid. That's just so special. The clip just says Oldwin on it. I think the clip is really nicely proportioned for the size of this pen. But here's the killer, man. Look at that nib. Huge nib. And also the nib, if I can get this in focus, I'll do a close-up of the nib and an insert. The nib is, I think it's like a number 8 or, no, it's a number 7. That's right. There's something odd. I knew there was something odd about it. It's a number 7 nib, and it just says Oldwin Paris in a really tiny print. It says 18 karat. Yeah. It's a great nib. It works pretty well. Occasionally I find it a little hard starting, but I do have some Robert Oster sheening ink in here, and sometimes those sheening inks will, as you can see, it's kind of stained the feed. Sometimes those sheening inks can be a little bit problematic, especially with a feed like this, whose fins are very, very close together, very tightly constructed. But it is a cartridge converter filler. So I don't feel so bad when I use a sheening ink or something that has particles in it, because with a cartridge converter you can take it apart and clean it really, really easily. So yes, I do occasionally find it rather hard starting, but once I get going, it's nice. It's a fine nib. It writes well. It feels really great in my hand, and yet somehow, overall, I just don't find myself reaching for it that often. It's just, aesthetically, it's great. But the aesthetics of writing are not particularly interesting to me. Now, maybe that's just because I've gotten this in the middle of some other purchases that really are exciting to me, such as the ASC Club, and and again, a couple of Viscontis that I really love, in particular the limited edition Thames, which is modeled on the Opera Master from Chatterley Pens. So maybe it's just the context. Maybe this is a pen that in a few months I'll look at my case and go, why haven't I inked that up? And I'll ink it up and be in love with it. But right now it's kind of sitting here in the case, kind of getting ignored. But I also wanted to do a little mini review of this pen, because I bought this at the Chicago Pen Show from my friend Sarge. But a couple weeks later, I was in Paris for the first time, which gave me the opportunity to go to Mora Stilos, the shop owned by Andre Mora, who makes these Oldwin pens, but he also sells other pens in his shop. And it is a shop that has existed in Paris since his father owned it decades before. I think it's been around since the 1920s. And also, along with this Oldwin Classique, there's also a style that Andre makes called the Art Deco, which has a kind of stepped cap, which I was hoping to find actually an Art Deco on a material I really coveted. So I got to the store, and it turned out it was not very far from where I was staying in Paris, so that was great. Got to the store, and Andre himself does speak English, but he's a bit of a shy person, and he doesn't love to speak English. You can just kind of tell that. And while I was doing my best to speak French while I was in Paris, I really don't speak French. I can read it okay, but I don't parlay all that well. So it was a little clunky in terms of the communications, and he didn't have any Art Deco style pens in materials that I found particularly compelling, but he did have a couple more classics, and one was in Arco Brown, the Omas celluloid that's so gorgeous. And let me tell you, on this pen, with its uninterrupted barrel, its girth, its size, that looked gorgeous. Gorgeous. The Arco really looked gorgeous on it. He had two there, and I thought, well, this is kind of a pricey pen, and I did just get this model pen in a celluloid a couple weeks earlier. Do I really want another pen? On the one hand, it's the Arco celluloid, which I really love. On the other hand, I hadn't completely fallen in love with this model, and I did just get this one, and I, yada, yada, yada. I thought maybe I should sleep on this a little bit, because it's not like a $20 souvenir. Next day, both pens had been sold. They were gone. Ding, ding, ding. I don't know if I saved myself there or if I made a big mistake. But this pen I do have. I did not buy it in Paris. Sad. Wanted to buy a pen in Paris. Wanted to buy a pen in the shop. But I suspect someday this will grow on me. Someday this will become a pen I really love. Right now, it's still sort of a pen I admire. And I'm glad I have it. No regrets. This is not a regrets video. No regrets, but it's just kind of a, why don't I love this more than I do? By the way, another thing about shopping for pens in Paris, unlike the U.S., you can find pens everywhere. Fountain pens. You can find them everywhere. A lot of Lamis. Even a store on the corner will be selling a Lamy pen. Mont Blancs here and there, some Watermans, and then of course there are other proper pen shops like Moristilo's where you can find a whole range of vintage and some modern pens. Um, Even the flea markets had fountain pens. And I don't mean like overpriced fountain pens like you find in flea markets here, where they're vintage pens, where the celluloid has literally melted to contort the shape of the pen, and they still have looked this up in some catalog that says it's worth $190, and it's not worth 10 cents. But actually properly working fountain pens. Though by and large what I saw at various flea markets and street sales were school pens, cheapo school pens that I really didn't need to add to my collection. So there's that. I will insert some images here so you can see some close-ups, and there we go. The Oldwin Classique, and I'm just going to keep calling it the Speakeasy Celluloid, this blue and red striped, gorgeous celluloid. Bye.